another conversation around mental health and hope during this time, particularly for families who are trying to support the young humans in this world who are navigating really challenging times alongside all of us. My name is Houston. I'm one of the co-founders of Character Strong, and I've spent a lot of time talking to and really probably the bulk of the time actually listening to young people and their stories. And I'm super excited to share space today with a new friend in my life, Kary.
Houston, it's really nice to see you. I appreciate you having me here. I see the book there in the background. My name is Kary Youman. Yeah, it looks great back there. My name is Kary Youman. I am a learning and development manager, and I'm also a kindness ambassador. Really my lens is just around allowing people to find that self-kindness within themselves so that they can, just make space in the world. A lot has happened this year, and I think kindness really is the core of us getting through this.
Now, the way we discovered each other, Kary, is through kindness. There's not a lot of us who would explicitly say that kindness is a big part of our work or as an ambassador or an advocate for kindness. So talk to me for just a little bit about how maybe your view on kindness might be unique to the generalized version of it in the world.
Yeah, I've come to believe that kindness is a virtue. So, there's a part of me that feels like none of this is unique. It's just how we sort of spin it and how we share it with people. And, I think there's two types of kindness. There might even be a third, but I think you have, more of the traditional, random acts of kindness, going out, being kind to people, saying please and thank you, as you describe it as confetti kindness, which is important. It plays its role. But for me, I think it's important for us to self-reflect and offer that same kind of kindness to ourselves. I can't tell you how many people I work with who are the nicest people in the world, the most giving and most caring people when it comes to their community and to their friends. But when it comes to them, being able to hold that space and grace for themselves, it can be really challenging. We all have different backgrounds that might cause that. But for me, I really just try to work and talk with people to help them to first recognize that kindness really starts with you. And when you're able to just slowly start to chip away at whatever is holding you back from treating yourself with that same kindness, it really opens you up, I feel, to just be more present with the people who you genuinely want to be there for.
I want to loop back intentionally to that piece of the conversation here in just a little while, but let's deviate the path for a second.
All right.
If the goal is to take care of people, or probably a big percentage of the desires of why people would be watching this, they hope to care for others that are in their care. What does that look like right now for young people who are navigating mental health challenges of all kinds, whether it's anxiety or depression or sense of loneliness, or what does that look like as a family member to create space for that for young people?
Yeah, I sit back and I think about, what would my life be like right now if I was, in elementary school or high school, or, even getting into my first year of college. And I think for parents, in the same space as their kid right now, as their young adult, I think it's really important for us to, first off, take a moment to listen. I think it's really easy for us to be on the outside looking in. Maybe we see that our young adult is, maybe not in their element, maybe they're, kind of out of it. And it's really easy, I think, for us to just start throwing out suggestions. Oh, why don't you do this, or clean your room, or go take care of that, or why don't you go outside? And again, being in a pandemic, going outside makes it much more difficult. But just to scale back, I think the first part of, being in a space with your young adult is listening and asking more questions. I think not only has this pandemic forced us to look ourselves in the mirror, but I think it's also given us a chance to truly connect with the people who we love and who are closest to us by first off asking them, how can I support you? What do you need? And if they don't know what they need, give them a moment to maybe figure that out so that you can meet them halfway. But I think the first part of it really is asking better questions and being willing to listen. Because no one really knows what's going on. I think we have to be patient with each other.
Yeah, I heard a statement earlier that we don't need heroes right now, we need guides. And I think inclinations as family members is sometimes we want to be the hero. That feels like the natural reaction is to save as opposed to guide. And so I like that paradigm shift. And I suppose I wonder from you, what are some of the powerful questions you feel like have been asked of you or that you ask young people right now? What are the sorts of questions we're talking about when it comes to checking in? What do you need? How can I support you? What are other places we could go?
Yeah, It's interesting, because it's not so much what you say, it's how you say it, and I don't think you need to be a rocket scientist or come up with anything out of the ordinary. I think it's really, what is your intention behind the question? Asking someone how they're doing and how I can support you is one thing. But if someone really feels like you're with them and you're asking that question and you're sitting with it and you're not waiting for a response or trying to manipulate the conversation, I think that really just opens up the door, and I think also too, just silence. Again, I think it's really easy to get uncomfortable with the space that might come from asking someone a question, them not being able to answer it, or us feeling like we have to answer something right away. But again, I feel like that wisdom, that the true virtue really does lie in that space. And it just gives us all a chance to just kind of consolidate what we're feeling and just speak from a place that might be a little bit more vulnerable. But I think we have to give each other that space. So again, it's not so much about the question, it's the intention behind the question and how we're showing up when we're asking people these questions.
Probably a piece of where that comes from, Kary, is our like sense of what it means to be in a family, like what our definition of family looks like. And I know some of the things you've talked about passionately is what it means to show up for family. Could you share a little bit about like your philosophy on family, how it relates to kindness and sort of these conversations on support?
Absolutely. Luckily last year I had an opportunity to share, part of my story at TEDx, which I won't really get into right now, but a big part of that really was, as I mentioned in the talk, it's creating a safe space for the truth to really have space to unravel. I think when we go into situations with judgment and you should have did this, or how come you didn't do that, or you're always doing this, we're really limiting, I feel, the capacity for someone in our life to grow and to really lean into that greater version of themselves. So I think when it comes to family, when it comes to community, when it comes to, your employer, your child, your teacher, whatever the case, I think it's important to try to go into these situations with the least amount of judgment possible. And again, I'm not saying erase your mind from judgment, but just recognize that no one's actually gone through this before. I think being in a pandemic is fairly unique for a lot of us right now. And a lot of us are tripping up and just kind of figuring it out as we go. So I think if we can give someone the same leeway or space that we would want for ourselves, again, kind of going back to that golden rule, it's not so much do unto others as you would have them do unto you, but it's do unto others as they would like you to do unto them. So again, I think it comes with listening and just meeting someone where they are, and then trying to essentially meet them there and go on that journey with them. Because I think ultimately what I found is that people, for the most part, just want to be seen. They want to be heard and they want to be forgiven, because life can be challenging.
How do we hold, and I think you and I have maybe experienced similar pushback in the kindness world, of how do we address mental health without dismissing the nature of the problem, in the sense of what is kindness's relationship to the mental health world, and how can we practice kindness in a way that is non-dismissive of people's hurt?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question. And I sit with that often. I'm really into like strengths and like us leaning into our strengths. And one of my strengths actually happens to be positivity. And one thing that I learned, the blind side of positivity, is sometimes you can sort of swoop past someone who might be having a hard time. Oh, you'll get over it. Or, hey, there's silver lining, or at least this isn't like this, or it could always be worse. And again, like you really have to be careful with that, because I feel like we have to meet people where they are, and we have to be sensitive to the many different personalities that exist. So I think with kindness, I think you can still show compassion and kindness and just be with someone. If someone's, going through, a challenge mentally, or is clinically depressed or on a medication, I feel like even if they're not responding in the way we want them to respond, I think there's a way for us to still show up with that compassion and that empathy that allows us to be in that space, even if someone's not giving us back what we ultimately would want them to give back. Let me backtrack for a second. I think too, with kindness, I think as you talk about in your book, deep kindness, you're not really looking for them to respond to you back with kindness. I think deep kindness is really getting to the root. It's, hey, I'm showing up for you in this way because I want the best for you. I want to be here for you. and I want to help you to heal in the best way I can by just being present in your journey. So I think, again, it just goes back to recognizing where people are without trying to change where they are, and just being okay with that. And that takes time. You know, I don't think it happens overnight. It does take time. It is a practice, but I think it's something truly worth, you know, leaning into and getting better at. It's a muscle.
Yeah. A couple things you said there that I want to highlight and go deeper on. The first one is the things that we have the tendency to say in the desire to be positive or hopeful. Things like, it's going to be okay. Things like, at least it's not, or it could be worse if, and those sorts of narratives that in an attempt to offer positivity or hope, sometimes we are dismissive, right? We're bypassing the real work, which is to sometimes sit with people in their suffering, which I think there is a piece of that we have to honor, which is that is the harder work. That is the more time intensive work. It is the more draining work sometimes to do that really effectively. As means of a simple example, when my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer, people from all over, the narrative consistently was like, she's a tough lady, she's going to be okay. And so many of those statements, while well-intentioned, were ultimately dismissive because I didn't believe any of them to be true. And I'll never forget the one woman, Megan Birch, who pulled me aside, and I was bracing myself for that moment of, your mom's a tough lady, or it's going to be okay. And instead, she just sat with me, looked me right in the eyes, and she started to cry in a way that gave me, for the first time since my mom's diagnosis, permission to cry with someone that wasn't my family. And her crying wasn't like, I feel bad for you. Her crying was just, I'm here with you. And we didn't say anything. We didn't say a word. I just gave her a big hug at the end. And that was the most healing experience of the whole experience. And my mom is 3.5 years cancer free, and there's a lot of beautiful things on the far side of that. But I look back on that moment as one of the most profound actions of kindness in my life, which was just full presence without the desire to alleviate, right? To poke the hole, to hit the evacuation button, to pop out, because that's our tendency, is we want to escape it because it feels so hard. So all that to say, to come back to the early part of our conversation, when we give that to people, there is a necessity to take care of ourselves on the pre or post, right? Whether gearing up for it or post. So talk to me about how you identify practices of meaningful self-care, maybe some tips for people to implement it in their own lives.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that story, Houston, and I'm glad your mom is doing well. You know, in terms of self-care, you know, it's different for everyone, but for me, I'm a morning guy. You know, some people are more in the evening, they have an evening ritual, but I think it really comes down to just trying to figure out a way to honor yourself every day. And that can look a lot of different ways. I know for some people, it can be challenging to treat yourself with care because you feel like you don't deserve it. And I would really challenge you to question that. Because you deserve just as much, you deserve as much as you're willing to open yourself up to. And for me, specifically being in the pandemic, I've really committed myself to developing a morning routine that allows me to fill my cup up in a way that makes me available for the people in my life. So I'll get up pretty much at the same day. I'm at the same time. I'm in the 5 a.m. club. So I get up 5 a.m. no matter what. And it's really a series of, you know, there's meditation, there's stretching, there's journaling, there's, every once in a while, I'll do yoga. I'll listen to a podcast. I'll journal, but then I'll also write, and then I'll just have a healthy shake. And by this time, you know, it's 7:30, you know, that's 2.5 hours. And again, I know there's some parents that don't have the luxury of that kind of time. So I think you have to find what works best for you. But for me, in my mind, I know that when I start my day in that way, that I've done what I can for myself. And as a result, I wake up just feeling like I have a little bit more of that, I guess some people call it chutzpah, you know, to kind of get through the day. And I think for me, ultimately, like, you have to show up in that way. I think people can feel when you're not doing the work yourself. So for me, that routine in itself is like my way of saying like, hey, this is kind of like my street cred for like showing up and like trying to be present in the best way that I can, so that I can hold this space in the best way I can for all the people who are consistently coming to me throughout the course of the day in my work.
I think you said a few things there that I really like. One of the big ones is you said, I'm in the 5 a.m. club, which I know feels a little bit in jest, but there's actually some real power behind that statement, which is so many intentions fail because we fail to describe ourselves as the kind of people who. There's wild research on the simplicity and power of saying, I'm the kind of person who wakes up at 5 a.m. I'm a runner. And as soon as we start to describe ourselves as a thing, the backwards habits can begin to fall into place. In the research, it would be called implementation intentions. If I want to do blank, then I need to do blank. Or I'm the sort of person who does this, which means I have to do this. So I think there's so much power in even just that statement. And I'm interested because I know your world is coaching. What are some other like powerful statements that families could be making right now to themselves or to young people?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think when I have just kind of like my catchphrases is, one is, and again, this isn't to push anything to the side, but like, this too shall pass. We will get through this. I'm not alone. I can do this. You got this. Keep going. For me, it's just, how do I have words that move me into motion? And then I also have ones where it's like, sometimes the obstacle is the way. I forget the name of the author who wrote it, but sometimes just sitting with something and just saying to yourself, like, this too shall pass, but in this moment, like, this is the lesson that I get to learn. What can I learn from this? Life is never personally trying to attack us and put us in a situation where everything is inconvenient. I mean, I think there's always an opportunity for us to learn. I think for me, no matter what's going on, I ask myself, what can I learn from this? What is the takeaway? And I think just that small paradigm shift allows me to just lean into things that might be more challenging, because instead of seeing it as, this always happens, it's, what can I learn from this? How can this make me better? How can this improve my life? Has really made a difference.
I like that a lot. That life isn't happening to me, it can be happening for me if I choose to think about it in that way. And some of those, and like the stoic version of that is like, life is happening beside me, like life is happening no matter what. And I choose whether or not I'm taking it personally, or recognizing obstacles as perhaps the most important opportunities to learn. Right? As we would talk about at Kary Youman, the only the way out is through. There's no way around it. There's the classic story of the buffalo and the cattle who walk away from the storm, who end up spending more time in it, as opposed to the buffalo who turn and face it. And as they walk through it, they still get wet, but it happens to be shorter because they've chosen to face the stressors that are inevitable in life. Kary, as you close out today, any famous like quotes or isms or questions you might ask me or families that would help during this time?
First off, I just want to say, thanks for having me. It's always cool to share and, share ideas. But I guess my question for you and, whoever's, watching this right now is, what has been a big win for you in 2020? I think it's really easy to look at, kind of the darkness of this year and the residue of so many things that are just never going to be the same. But the fact that you have the ability to watch this right now, like you're a survivor, like you're still here, you still have the opportunity to be a part of this story. So I think the big question is like, what is a big win for you this year? And Houston, I could ask you that question if you want to answer it, but that's something that I've been asking myself and asking my friends and asking my community is, I know you've had some setbacks this year. I know you've got a couple shiners from this year, but what was a big win for you this year? What are you most proud of?
Yeah, I think one of my mantras is like, purpose is amplified in pain. And so I think this time has provided me with a tremendous amount of purposeful work, because I know that there are certain things that I'm able to provide that are helpful. Because I look out in the world, I see pain, and I'm like, I know how to alleviate, not all of it, but I know how to alleviate this little piece. I know how to reframe this little piece. And so while I have worked probably harder than I ever have my whole life, I feel incredibly abundant and purposeful in doing that work. And as I think about the families who are answering that question for themselves, I think the recognition of sometimes it is the smallest of wins during this time that feel and can feel and should feel like really big things. Perhaps it's like the first time you had that meaningful conversation with your kid after because you were both so busy for so long, and now you have the space to do it. You know, maybe that's the biggest win of all. Or perhaps you had the courage to finally invite a conversation into your home that was long overdue. And because proximity breeds friction, maybe some of that has happened in the meantime. So I like that question a lot, Kary. It's a win in spite of the residue of darkness. Those are the kind of words I thrive on. Thank you, Kary, for today.
Thank you
For your heart and for being a kindness ambassador in the world. We're not the only ones, and that gives me hope.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Houston.